Hello and welcome back to another episode. Now today I want to talk to you about something which I hinted at in a previous video. When we looked at the Aliens Armageddon machine, the arcade machine, which I came across on the ferry over to Northern Ireland a few weeks ago, I mentioned that I come from a part of the world where there's actually still a thriving arcade culture, and I'm talking about North Wales, in particular the coast, the Rhyl and Prestatyn area, which isn't the most glamorous place to grow up, but it's certainly one of the most interesting, especially if you're into computer games. While lots of Britain and say the America and other parts of the world really sort of, I suppose, forgot, they let go of the charms of arcade culture in the 90s. Rhyl in particular has actually held on to its tradition of arcades all the way through. From the 80s into the 90s and even today, you can go down to the seafront and go into arcade after arcade and play increasingly old but also some new arcade machines, and it's wonderful. It was a great way to grow up. I mean, technically, I'm about 10 years too young to have grown up in the real height of the arcades, the arcade culture, I guess. Even actually in Terminator 2, when you see John Connor in an arcade, that was when arcades were starting to sort of to fade out of popular life. This is with the growth of the home consoles, I suppose. Mega Drive, the SNES, the NES in particular, started to kill off arcades. Parents actually didn't really see the point of giving their kids money to spend on these games, and also kids were spending their money now on cartridges for their consoles. But if you really wanted to be at the height of that, you had to be a bit older than me, and I'm just not that old. But luckily in Rhyl, they held on to some of these things a bit longer than other places. They held on to the mullet, they held on to the shell suit for a bit longer than other parts of the world, a bit longer than they really should have done. But also, thankfully, they've held on to arcade culture. And I suppose my memories of exploring and hanging out in the arcades in Rhyl, and also actually computer game shopping, but I may not talk about that today, really come from the mid to late 90s. That's the height of my Rhyl and Prestatyn teenage years. And there's a few things basically that I want to talk about today. Because the first thing is those arcades where you go around and you're playing arcade games to get tokens. So often these are very practical games. So there was one in particular called Hillbilly Moonshine in Rhyl, and I hope it's still there. It was last time I checked. It was looking a bit tired though, and it's like a stage where you've got all these puppets that are automatons. They move around and they sort of they say things, and they have these little targets next to them, and basically you get like a BB gun rifle and you can shoot at these hillbillies. So there's one on the toilet, there's one obviously drinking moonshine out of like a barrel or something, and the better you did at these practical games and things like table air hockey, in some cases sort of pinball machines, those machines where you grab things, this kind of stuff, the more tokens you got. And then you could take those tokens to this sort of central booth where a friend of mine used to work, and they would let you choose a prize. So often the prizes were ridiculous in terms of how much tokens you'd have to earn in order to get them. So there was, I think one time I went in, there was a Sega Game Gear which was just crazy. It was something like maybe like 1,000 tokens, and on an average day maybe you'd earn 5 tokens, so 5 to 15 tokens. So that was a lot of time and a lot of money to spend to get a Game Gear. So I never got that, but I did win a watch, because my friend, as I say, was in the booth, and he actually upped my total just a little bit. He gave me an extra sort of 3 or 4 tokens on a particular day, and I got a really cool watch. Well, cool. I got one of those calculator watches, little buttons on. There's little grey rubber buttons. I wish I still had that calculator watch. Frankly, actually, I'd wear it now. I think I'd probably use it. Anyway, so great memories of that kind of arcade experience. But also other experiences which are more, I suppose, computer game based. So one in particular actually would be Time Crisis. I used to have such a good time playing Time Crisis. It's an arcade sort of rail shooter. You have a pedal to make yourself duck behind cover, this kind of thing, and it's a great game. Sadly though, it left my life far too soon when the bowling alley that it was housed in, and also the Laser Quest next door, burned down. That's just real, folks. Sometimes places burn down, and I was so gutted. Even to this day, whenever we drive past that little section, sort of empty still actually, that little section on the front, I think, Time Crisis. I miss Time Crisis so much. There was one noise which I'll always associate with the arcades in Rail. Sadly, it's not there anymore, but also I don't live there anymore. But they used to have this. I think it was an electric chair, like a jokey electric chair where you sit in it and you hold onto these poles, and it might give you like a slight sort of throbbing electric shock. But the point is, it's meant to scare you, and you have to hold on for as long as you can before you let go. And it would constantly play the Addams Family tune. It was like a Fester Addams theme. So Fester was, I think, behind the chair with a light bulb in his mouth that was glowing, as Fester often does. And whenever I came out of the cinema, for example, the time we came out of the cinema having just watched Batman and Robin, all I could hear was da-da-da-da, 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 da-da-da-da. I know, it's clicking, isn't it? Da-da-da-da. And it just wouldn't stop. And it goes da-da-da-da. Then you get a couple of minutes, a couple of seconds actually, not minutes, and then da-da-da-da. You could hear that for miles around. That's one of the sounds that just sort of lives in my head from that time. House of the Dead. House of the Dead was such an important gaming experience for me in the arcades. My friends and I would try and obviously outcompete each other in terms of score, and I was so pleased to see when House of the Dead Overkill came onto the Wii. My brother and I loved that game. In fact, I've got the special boomer, the big sort of hand pistol for that. And obviously there were other classics. Street Fighter 2. My first experiences with Street Fighter 2 were in the arcade. Yeah, no, they were. Before I had it on the Mega Drive, before the game I've got upstairs, it was the arcade. But it was that sort of time in the arcades when people weren't really overly competitive on Street Fighter. You hear these sort of grand stories where people would line up to beat the person who's just there, King of the Hill style, beating everyone. That didn't really ever happen certainly not when I was in the arcades. But again, we try and beat each other up, compete for score. I've always been a fan of Ryu. I know it's a bit sad, it's a bit predictable, but Ryu was and still is probably my favourite character to play with. There's one game in particular, and I'm going to have to do a Let's Play of this. In fact, I'll do that for the next video, shall we? And that is Mad Dog McCree. Now, Mad Dog McCree was actually in the same arcade in the bowling alley where Time Crisis was, so it sadly got burned to a crisp as well. But I never got to play Mad Dog. But I was always fascinated by it. Whenever we went bowling, I'd just see this holding screen, and I'll put it up over my shoulder. The sort of menu where there's this guy on a horse, sort of silhouetted, shoots at you, rides away, and then you see all these characters coming up on the screen. And I was wondering, what is this game about? It was live action, and what they do is they sort of insert cuts when you shot your gun. So someone would jump in, go ha, and then you go poof, with your light gun, and then it would cut to a piece of footage of them going ah, sort of dying. And I always wanted to play it and never got a chance, but week before last, I actually picked up Mad Dog on the Wii. So yeah, let's play that together for my next video. There were arcade machines which were physical vehicles, and my brother and I loved this. Like, you could get into a Ferrari, or think something that looked a bit like a Ferrari, or like a Lotus or something, and play, the sort of the scrolling road style arcade machines, or what was it, Lotus, Manx TT and Road Rash. That's it. In terms of biking, and you hold on to the physical bike, and you're swinging around. It was arcades are so much fun because these are spaces and these are furniture essentially, which is designed to augment gaming. And I mean, I suppose the closest that we can get commonly today would be maybe a gaming chair, but in this instance you could get into cars, you could pick up a machine gun, you could get onto the bike, and you could play, you could sort of get into it. And the best driving simulators had 3 or even 4 screens which would sort of slightly surround you, so you had this sort of almost 3-dimensional space, this sense of being maybe behind the windshield. So I have a slightly random story about a day out in the arcades, and that is where this huge man, massive man, really big round man, walks up to me, and he's just in his swimming shorts, and he's really quite intimidating, and he just walks over to me, he sort of he blocks out the sun, kind of thing, and I'm like just staring up at him like, what's going to happen next? And he was from Liverpool. Now, some people in Liverpool have a sort of have a, I don't know, like a, they have the accent which is very round and deep and pleasing. So sort of Ringo Starr kind of accent, where sort of it's very like that. People sort of talk in a very nice, rounded, sort of warm kind of way, like that kind of thing. That's not quite right. Sadly, I've got a cold, so I can't really do it properly. But that sort of thing. I mean, one of the ways to do it actually is to hold your nose. So instead of "Hello there, welcome to Liverpool," this kind of thing, I'm going to get in trouble for that. But anyway, this my auntie talks like that, although with a higher pitched voice. Anyway, this man walks over. He's from Liverpool. But he hasn't got one of those accents. What he has got is this really high-pitched Liverpool accent. So this big, hulking mass of human being walks over, and out of nowhere he just goes, "Excuse me!" "What?" I said. "What? Yeah?" "I'm trying to find the beach. Can you point me in the right direction?" I was just staring at him, kind of like a dog staring at the moon, sort of. How is that noise coming out of this man? And he goes, "I mean, do you know? Can you help me, like?" So I point him in the right direction, and he sort of waddles. He's a bit like sort of Totoro. He sort of waddles off, and I sort of walked home in a bit of a daze, or back to the train station. And I was like, okay, wow, that was interesting. But you bump into all sorts of random characters at the arcades, and that one just for some reason just sticks in my head, because I was expecting like a really big sort of "Good night, mate," that kind of thing, but instead I got this, "Yeah, excuse me." Another thing that sticks in my mind about arcades is a slightly tragic thing, that you get families who'd come there, and this would be the highlight of their year, going on their summer holiday to Rhyl. And there are these sort of money dozer machines where you put money in, and depending on, you must have seen them, the money sort of drops down, you build up a bank of money, and then maybe some will drop off into a delivery chute if you're lucky enough to knock enough in the right direction. And there were families who you'd see who, they'd come along, and they'd be fairly young families, probably from Liverpool or Manchester, and what would happen was that mum and dad would just sit down in front of these dozer machines, and they'd just have a bucket of 2p coins, and they'd just be posting them into this dozer machine over and over again, and that would be them, and then the kids would be left to run around running amok. Actually, to be honest, even as a kid, I found these kids annoying. And then at lunchtime, well, actually no, at sort of breakfast and then lunchtime, the kids would come back and they'd say, "Have you won anything, mum or dad?" And if they had won something, the kids then got some money to go to McDonald's to get their food. If the families didn't win anything, then the kids didn't eat that day. And or didn't eat, as far as I could tell, during the day. Maybe they went back to a caravan or something and had a meal at home. Maybe they got McDonald's on the way home. Who knows? But it was just it was a little bit tragic to sort of to see that happening while you're just there, you know, with some candy floss or some rock, you know, having just bought that for 50p or something, playing on the arcade machine. It was a little bit. It always made me slightly sad, I have to say. And my friend who worked in the arcade, he was equally disturbed by this, actually. So it wasn't all lovely. I mean, sometimes the bright bulbs and the sounds hid the slightly dark human underbelly, as it were, the reality of life, you know. So, of course, Turtles in Time deserves an honourable mention. I have great memories of playing that. But I think most of all, for me, arcade computer games in particular were all about experiencing what I couldn't get at home. So whether these games were just never going to be ported to a home console because maybe they just didn't make enough money, or maybe the graphics were just too good to be on a home console at that stage, you were playing something which was state of the art, you know, really at the edge of what was possible in terms of computers. But also as well, you're playing in a way that you couldn't yet at home. These days you do have motion control, you have other ways of experiencing, other ways of interacting with your games much more regularly. And while we did have things like light guns and joysticks at home, the fact that you could actually get on, say, a bike and play Road Rash was just so exciting. That for me is the joy of arcade gaming. And of course, finally, on the way home, more often than not, we'd try and fit in a game of Crazy Golf. And Crazy Golf remains one of my favourite pastimes. My wife and I actually recently went and played the dinosaur-themed Crazy Golf on the coast here in the northeast, where we live. But in both Prestatyn and Rhyl, they have Crazy Golf courses, which are superb, great fun. So the perfect day out, actually, at the arcades would be maybe turn up in the morning, play a few rounds in the token arcade, get a prize, go and see a film, wander around to somewhere to get some lunch, maybe Burger King, maybe actually a little cafe, but I'll talk about that in another video. This is a really cool, amazing cafe that we used to go to. Some really weird characters in there. After that, go back to the arcades, maybe play some pinball, play some Hillbilly Shooter, play some Hillbilly Moonshine Shooter, or perhaps just experiment with the new arcade machines, and then finish with Crazy Golf. That would be my perfect arcade day out experience, and I think I'm going to have to try and do it again next time I go back to North Wales. And I'm pretty sure my lovely wife will be up for it as well. So yeah, I think we'll have to do that. It's been too long since I've just had a day at the arcades. So hopefully you guys have been lucky enough at some point to experience being close to a living, breathing arcade culture. It's so good. It's so vibrant, and also at times so real, in so much as you see things about people in arcades which you just don't see in other settings, like on the bus or on the train, or in a shop. People will react to things emotionally in ways which they wouldn't do in other public spaces, and they'll also, for example, with their families, behave in ways which are a little bit tragic. So arcades for me the arcade experience is so special, and hopefully you guys have had some opportunity to experience some of that at some point. If not, I'd highly recommend it. Go and give it a go. Anyway, this has been quite a long video. Hopefully this has been an interesting video, and yeah, arcade memories. I mean, I've got other memories, but I just wanted us to talk about that thing, arcade culture. It is great, and I genuinely feel lucky to have grown up where I did, when I did. I really do. Anyway, guys, as ever, until next time, do take care. Bye bye.